Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everyone, welcome to Bird Chat for October 8th as part of the Orange Audubon Society. I am Sam Mitchum. We've got Susan and Kathy and Deb will jump in there. But let's get right into it. So for tonight's Bird Chat, we'll do a couple of announcements. We'll do a couple of mystery birds and new arrivals as part of bird migration. And we're all very excited to have Maria here to do Recovering the Red-cockaded Woodpecker. And I've already got a list of questions for her, so we'll try to get right into this and see where we can get. Before we go, next week's program is October 15th, and it's 7 p.m. And this one is not part of the Zoom. It is on the Orange Audubon Society's YouTube channel, which you can Google search it or search it on YouTube and sign up for it, and it's super easy. But it's going to be a program on the UCF Purple Martin Project and early lessons from an undergraduate research program by Anna Forsman. And that should be super interesting too. Our friend Brian, he was part of that. And so we've heard a little bit about it, but I'm anxious to watch that one next week too. For upcoming bird chats, which will go back to our Zoom channel here, for October 22nd, we're gonna all kind of dive in and share our hotspots for Lake Apopka, the North Shore. And then on the 29th, we're gonna have someone from, Deb, is that right? Somebody from Red Start is gonna speak regarding optics, birding, scopes and binoculars and whatnot, which I'm also very interested in. And then on November 5th, we're going to have sparrows presented by Adam Kent. So, and all of those are at 7 o'clock, and those three will be on our Zoom channel.
And you have to register.
Yeah, which you have to register for, which you can do through Orange Audubon, follow up for updates on the Facebook page as well. So this Saturday at 7:15 a.m., we've got the monthly bird survey as part of Wekiwa Springs State Park. We do these once a month. They're super fun. We split up into groups and do 2 routes. This week I'm actually covering for Kathy, who normally runs it, but she's got other endeavors that she's doing. But still contact her to sign up for it. There's still a few spaces left. We'll be practicing the COVID procedures and protocols and social distance birding. So they're always fun, and we're usually out of there by 11 or so. It's only about 3 miles for each route. But you know, we normally get 40 species on each group, so it's nice. It's a really cool park if you haven't done it, and you learn something new every day. So it's super cool. And we also have big news, which I'm going to let Deb jump in here.
That we are going to hold the North Shore Birding Festival, not virtually, but in person. And we have changed the date to December 3rd through 7th, a whole more than a month earlier. And you were the first ones to hear this. And it's perfect timing. Maria has just put it up the flagpole and got us permission to go ahead with it. We're going to have 40 trips, but these are very small. We're all going very careful in regard to COVID-19. Only 10 people, masks, social distancing, but enough people wanted to get out there in person and learn from the experts that we're going ahead. So please watch. We'll let the Bird Chat registrants know, but you can also watch there's a North Shore Birding Festival Facebook page you can watch, and registration will be rolling out pretty soon. Thanks, Sam.
I think we're going to hand it over to Kathy. Sorry, there we go. I think you're muted, Kathy.
There I am. Okay, so now is fall migration. So we chose one of our migrants. So if you notice at the bottom of whatever device you're on, there is a little chat box. At any time you can type in what you think this is. It's one of the migrants. Oh boy, Terrence, you got that like really quick.
Very good.
Very good. Oh, you saw your first one a couple weeks ago. So if someone else doesn't see it and they want to type it in too, that's fine. Let me move this out of the way because I can't see. So the first two pictures you're going to see, just keep it on here for a moment, is the way I saw it. But I was really excited. We were at Meade, and actually Susan was there, and then Sam came later. So three of us had a nice experience with this bird, or there was a couple of them actually. And what was neat, and I've learned about this bird, is it does tend to be in saplings and shrubs more than the high canopy, which many warblers are up so high they can't see. So this little female was very cooperative. And someone asked, is it a female or young male? Sam, do we know?
It's, again, confusing fall warblers.
Yeah.
I would say that that's a young male.
Okay.
But as you're talking, I will look it up.
Okay. So this bird definitely had like a greenish, yellowish, limeish, greenish color on top of its head. It had wing bars. It was a pretty slender warbler with a relatively long tail. And it wasn't like hyperactive like some of the warblers are. It was just kind of moving around and flitting along the branches. So you can go ahead and we'll share for everybody that it is the chestnut-sided warbler. So if you were to see this in the spring, you'd see the chestnut sides, which I got to see that at Fort DeSoto. But this is my first time seeing one in the fall. So you can definitely see that lime green color on top of the head and on the back. This bird, it also does have an eye ring that you can see, and it's pale gray to white underparts. And Sam got some great pictures. And if you notice, you put this in the chat. You see, I'm a teacher. You can't get away from it. There's a bird that's really, 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 really common, especially in migration. It looks kind of like it. A bird that has a pretty long tail, small with an eye ring. Stick that in the chat if you know, and I'll keep talking.
That also is a female. Like,
it's a female.
The males will always have even just a little bit of brown, even the first.
Oh, okay. So this is a female. And this bird mostly eats insects, especially caterpillars and fly larvae, as well as spiders, locusts, leafhoppers. They feed mostly in deciduous habitats, which is exactly where we saw it. Seeds and fruit make up a small part of its diet, but when it's on its wintering grounds, it eats more fruit in the tropics. And did anyone? No one said. So this does resemble, if you see a bird that.
Karen had a guess.
Oh, red-eyed vireo. That's a good guess because I could see like with that grayish.
Mm-hmm.
But the bird we're thinking of that this will resemble is the blue-gray gnatcatcher, because it has a longish tail and it has the eye ring, but this bird definitely does not flit around as much. The blue-gray gnatcatcher will drive you nuts. Interesting, the male song, which we probably will never hear, maybe if one sings early in the spring migration, sounds like pleased to meet you. This bird has declined 45% since 1966, and that's mostly due to loss of habitat and, of course, migration hazards. And it does breed in the north and central United States around the Great Lakes in the Northeast, and also the adjoining parts in Canada. And they winter in Central America. So still think some are being found. So might be a good Saturday to go check out the local hotspots. And I'm going to turn it over to Susan.
All right, we have another new arrival, and we've kind of gone to the guess what this is bird type of
Yeah.
format. So these you're going to see mostly on the ground because they are ground foragers, although it did say that they will pop up to like not too tall, but bushes and shrubs and fly out like a flycatcher to catch insects also. But mostly they're ground foragers. What do you guys think? Any guesses? Okay, one of the things, it's one of the real characteristics, pine warbler. Pine warbler is pretty close. Palm warbler. Terrence has got it right again. So palm warbler, whoops, let's go there. So you can see palm warbler, it's kind of got the brownish olive bird. It's got a rusty cap on the top, black line through the eye, and that bit of yellow underneath, and a little bit of like rusty streaking, or reddish streaking. So then that one of the things I did want to bring up is that there are two different subspecies. So if we go to the next slide, there's actually a western or brown and the eastern or yellow subspecies. So the yellow, we are actually at the farthest they go down is mid-Florida or central Florida for the eastern or yellow. But they also only make up about like 5 to 15% of all the palm warblers that there are. Palm warblers are not actually considered threatened, and they're doing pretty well. So they're all the tail bobbers. You got it. They're the ones that they will always, when you see their tails, they're always bobbing up and down while they feed, mostly on the ground. And then if we look at the migration map, we can see that we're actually in their non-breeding grounds or wintering grounds, which is pretty good. Westerns go all the way down into the Caribbean, and they're down along that southern edge of the United States. Migration is through most of the eastern part of the US, and they do breed up in the boreal forests of Canada. So they do travel quite a bit, kind of snowbirds coming down and staying with us. The yellows will be a little bit harder to find, especially, in the winter, because of their plumage isn't too much different. So, all right. And then next we have Jack.
Hey folks, another new arrival. They're all showing up. If you have an idea of what this is, type it in chat. This is a rare bird for Central Florida. It's here during its non-breeding winter season. And this particular bird, we're pretty sure was here from November through March of last year. This is a female. Oh, we have a winner?
Shauna.
Okay. They are a sit and wait predator. Predators located from an exposed perch, and they're pursued directly until captured. Prey is captured singularly, so they get one at a time. Large prey such as grasshoppers and butterflies are carried to the perch, and then the official scientific words were and beaten before consumption. They are noted for pursuing their prey in the air very quickly, very swift, direct flight. And if prey escapes, they will pursue it and keep going at it in very, very erratic, acrobatic chase until the capture. They often use short, swooping flights with immediate capture to the immediate return to the starting perch. This is, we're pretty sure, the same bird as the first photo. This was last year when people thought it was a first-year female. So you can see the undercoloring is not as pronounced as the first slide. And the first slide, that was an overcast and rainy day when that photo was taken. And also she did not look like she was enjoying something. I don't know what it was. Definitely got a little puffy on me. They take a variety of food, butterflies, grasshoppers, beetles, honeybees, termites, spiders. The males are much more colorful. I think we were talking earlier, and I think people were saying that there have been some males in this area in previous years. I think at the Orlando wetlands, and also, was it Kathy, St. Mark's? You can just nod if you want. Yeah, St. Mark's. During the breeding season, which is, we don't get to see it, but the male performs spectacular flights, 20 to 30 meters above the canopy, and they appear to bounce along the sky, fluttering their wings and singing. It must be quite a sight. So that's a vermilion flycatcher. And there is its, whoops, there's its territorial map. And you can see that it's not supposed to be here. How it got here, who knows? I guess maybe the best guess is that they get blown off course and then they find a place they like and they just keep going back to that place. But anyway, so anybody have anything to add to that?
When did you take that picture of the grumpy one?
Last weekend, I think.
Okay. I just figured it was recent, so.
Hey, Maria, in the past, there have been them, I remember going to see it on the Birdapalooza once. I can't remember if that was a female back then too?
It was, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Was the one we had at the U, was that a male that was there 2 years ago?
No, it was a female.
It was a female as well?
Yeah.
It just seemed like it was as red as this second-year bird, or what we're calling a second-year bird. It had it seemed like it had this amount of red on it at least, right?
Yeah, to my knowledge, I've only seen one male on the property, and it was probably 6 or 7 years ago. It was not along the wildlife drive.
All right.
So I'll kick it back to Sam at this point.
All right, thank you, Jack. All right, so our feature presenter is the land manager with St. John's River Water Management District. She is the lead wildlife biologist for the district's program to recover the endangered red-cockaded woodpecker as well as the Florida scrub jay. As land manager, she is responsible for nearly everything on 20,000-acre Lake Apopka North Shore, including, but not limited to, all the upland and marsh restoration projects, public recreation, prescribed burning, removal of invasive plants and animals, as well as the property security against things like poaching and vandalism. Through the creation of the Lake Apopka Loop Trail and the Wildlife Drive, she has led the district's effort to provide public access to the North Shore for all of us, which is amazing. We appreciate her working with Orange Audubon and helping us to educate on red-cockaded woodpeckers tonight. Ladies and gents, the invaluable Maria Zondervan.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I don't know what I've done to deserve that, but thank you so much. Well, we are going to be talking about my favorite bird. Well, I can't have a favorite since I work with scrub jays too. They're both awesome birds. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. Please let me know if you can't.
We see it.
All right, excellent, excellent. Yeah, so you may have heard just recently that this bird is being downlisted, or it's been proposed for downlisting. And usually once it's proposed, that means it's heading that way. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we have recovered this woodpecker and how we got to that point, because it's pretty exciting whenever something gets downlisted, although I fear for the lack of protection a little bit, I must say. So first of all, what is a red-cockaded woodpecker? Well, obviously it's a little woodpecker, we know that much. It's fairly small, it's about 8.5 inches. It lives in the pine forests of the southeastern United States. It's got that typical woodpecker black and white coloration that we've all come to see. It's got that black back with the barred white. So all of that's pretty common, but then it has something that sets it apart. The big identifying feature here is those large white cheek patches. So those really stand out even from afar, and none of the other woodpeckers that are out there in Florida are going to have that big bright white cheek patch. That's the thing you want to look for when you're looking for it. Of course, it's got the black cap, and everybody's like, hey, where's the red? Well, here on this angry male, we get to see the red, because that's the only time you see it is when they get angry. They start making this squawking noise to yell at you, and they show that red cockade. And I bet my sound's not going through, is it? You're not hearing that angry noise, are you? It is working. Oh, excellent. Okay, when I tested it with Deborah the other day, the sound was not working. So glad to hear that you got to hear the angry male there. So that's where it gets its name from. It's that red cockade that you only see on the males, the adult males. Now, juvies look a little bit different. You'll notice those bright white cheek patches aren't quite so white in this. They have a little more black in that cheek. They kind of look dirty, like they've been playing in the mud, like the kids that they are. Also, the males will have a crown patch. So instead of having the red cockade on the side, they have this red crown patch right smack in the center of their foreheads there. The females will have one that's black or gray. So this is how we can sex them when they're young. So if they have those lovely leg bands on and then they put their head down, we can tell if they're male or female and put that in our records that way. So that's pretty much the only way we know, other than having them in our hands again. So what makes them different from the other woodpeckers out there? So they're pretty cool. So they're cooperative breeders, which is really rare. And that basically means that the young from previous years will stay with their parents and help raise new offspring in following years. So we do have another bird in Florida, even though this is really rare. There is another bird in Florida that does this. So some of you probably know that bird, and it was mentioned just previously by Sam. It's the Florida scrub jay. They also do this, where the young will stay. And some will stay for one season. Some can stay their entire lives. And particularly the oldest male in the family is likely to stay. And he just stays and basically waits for his dad to kick the bucket so he can inherit the territory. Others that come along later might know that their line in succession is pretty far back, so they might move on after a year or two. So they're called helpers, these birds that stick around, and they will do pretty much anything the breeding pair does. That includes incubating the eggs, brooding the chicks, feeding the young, defending the territory, everything. A family of red-cockaded woodpeckers is called a clan, so we often refer to them as clans, and they excavate a number of cavities. Those are the holes you see in the pine trees, and they use them both for roosting and for breeding. So they actually live in those holes year-round, so every night they're in there. And they do not share, so each woodpecker will have its own cavity, although there might be multiple cavities in one tree. In one rare instance, we actually had an entire clan in one tree. It had 5 cavities in it, 5 different birds in it, and then we lost that tree to a wildfire and we lost the entire family. So that's upsetting when they do things like that. A collection of those red-cockaded woodpecker cavity trees that's defended by a family is called a cluster. So if you hear me refer to a cluster, that is the cluster of trees that these birds live in and defend. So it's the core center of their territory. So a few other things that make them different is that they're the only North American woodpecker to excavate cavities in living pine trees. So if you've ever been around pine trees, or even cut down a Christmas tree, you know they're super, super sappy. So as opposed to dead trees where it's dry wood. So why go through all the trouble of pecking into a sappy, sappy tree? Well, there's reasons for that. But they're not completely silly about it. They will only peck cavities in trees that are really old and are infected with something called red heart fungus. And this is what makes cavity excavation possible, because that's basically a dead part of the tree, a dead softer part of the tree. And inside that part, there is no sap, so they don't end up with sap in their bedrooms. Now, no one really knows how woodpeckers know which trees have this, but they theorize that when they're pecking on the trees, they can hear that hollowness or some change in the sound or the pitch of the tree. So they know where to start their cavities, because they have to get through that sapwood with all that drainy sap to get to that part where they can actually excavate a cavity. But again, why? Why all the trouble? Well, you'll see on these pictures that are coming up here that they create what are called resin wells. That means in addition to that the hole they live in, the cavity, they also peck additional holes all around it, and they make the sap just bleed down the tree. So you see how much sap is pouring down this tree here. And that is to keep the snakes out of their holes. They do not like these snakes, but these red rat snakes and other rat snakes are just excellent, excellent climbers, and they can smell the eggs, they can smell the young and the adult birds themselves, and they are their main predator. But they have a hard time climbing that tree if it's super sticky with sap. So that is why the birds go through all that trouble. So pretty unique, guys. So a little bit about the life history and biology of these guys. They start laying eggs in mid-April. We used to say mid-May. We are now a full month ahead of where we used to be in the breeding cycle, and it's theorized that that's because of climate change. Typically lay 3 to 5 eggs. This picture here looks like there's more eggs than that, but that's because one of those eggs is actually broken in half because one has already hatched. So you're seeing 2 halves in there. They hatch after about 10 days. Occasionally they stay in a little longer, but about 10 days. And then they fledge at about 26 days. Again, a little variance there, but that's about when they take their first flight. Once they leave that cavity, they never get back in that hole. Parents are like, once you leave home, that's it. You gotta go find your own house. So they might be living out there in the open for a while until they find a cavity of their own. But the parents and the other helpers will continue to feed these fledglings for months and months. And I have even seen them still feeding young of the previous year after they had young in the current year. So some of those teenagers are kind of pesky. They just want to keep having that food. Mortality is really high the first year, in particular for females, but for males also. But females tend to have a higher mortality because they are more likely to move away from the home territory that first year. They tend to want to go off and find that young man just as soon as they can, whereas a lot of the males seem to be content to live around the house. And there's, you know, protection in numbers, safety in numbers, as they say. So pretty high mortality there. What do they eat? Well, basically anything that's an insect that can climb on a pine tree is fair game. So whether that's an egg stage, larval stage, or adult stage, they will eat a ton of that. Roaches, spiders, scorpions, beetles, ants, man, makes me hungry just thinking about it. So ants is a big primary part of their diet. When it's available, they will also eat some fruits and some nuts and seeds. So all of that is there. So looks like they got a pretty cool thing going. So why were they in the threat of extinction? And they still are, despite the downlisting. So it's the same story we hear a lot. It is habitat loss as the primary driving force. We have less than 3% of the original longleaf pine forest left in the southeastern United States, and that is the main ecosystem that they live in. So longleaf pine are very slow growing pine trees, and they're very strong pines, and they grow extremely straight. So they make perfect building material, and they make great telephone posts and power poles. So a lot of those great strong posts that you see standing out there, those were made of longleaf pine, including the ones we're now missing on the Lake Apopka Wildlife Drive, for those of you who know what we're talking about there. Those are longleaf pine. So a lot of that was logged over. And then what's remaining is often very fragmented. So small pieces, and they're just far from each other. Poor habitat quality in the remaining forest, often due to lack of fire. Fire is extremely important to these guys. They need fire about every 2 to 4 years through their ecosystem to keep it really grassy and full of bugs, and to keep the hardwoods from encroaching on those pine ecosystems. Once the pines get in there, it's just not very suitable habitat for them. Lots of flying squirrels move in to compete with them for their cavities, and lots of other issues. We could talk about that all day, but we don't have that kind of time. And the trees that are remaining are often too small or too young. We talked about they need the old trees with that red heart fungus. And that's primarily because as they were cutting out these longleaf pine forests, even the ones that they were going to keep for the forestry industry, they generally did not replant them in longleaf pine because they're too slow growing. That's what makes them so strong and straight and everything. But, you know, most of us don't want to have to wait. If this is from an economical standpoint and I own this land, probably not going to have to wait 50, 70 years before I can harvest pine. So I might instead choose to plant slash pine, which can be harvested much, much sooner. So that's kind of what's happened. It's converted over to slash pine, and all the old stuff has been cut out. Then we have a problem with genetic drift and inbreeding. This just happens when your populations get really small and the habitat's fragmented and they can't move between populations as easily. These guys really don't move far from home, and they do not migrate. And they're very susceptible to catastrophes. So this picture is from 2004 when we had Charlie, Jean, and Francis come through and just whack the properties over and over again. Lost a ton of cavity trees. As you can imagine, where there's a cavity, there's a lot of wood missing. So that makes a weak point in the tree. And so a lot of them snapped off right at the cavity. Most of the time the birds got out and we didn't lose that many individuals. Occasionally one got crushed in there, but for the most part it was just the trees that we lost, but that causes a problem as well. So this map shows the original distribution as we know it from red-cockaded woodpeckers. So anything that's in blue is where they used to be. And if there's a red dot in there, it means that there is still some extent of a woodpecker in that county. It may just be one, and it may be small, but that's where they were. So what are biologists doing to help? That is the big question. What have we been out there doing to get this thing down listed? So we're just going to look at one example. So I work for St. John's Water Management District, and we are the lead managers for the Hal Scott Regional Preserve and Park. And it is this little tiny dot here amongst all the big dots here, which are the bigger red-cockaded woodpecker recovery populations. But it's kind of cool to work on a small site where you really get to know your birds and you get to know them on a whole different, more intimate level. So it's kind of cool. But even these small populations can do a lot. So Hal Scott's actually part of a meta population. So the orange line that you see here is the boundary of Hal Scott. And the blocks to the left are the Stanton Energy Site run by OUC, Orlando Utilities Corporation, and a couple of private pieces. And they have woodpecker cavities over there as well, clusters over there. And they have foraging areas on those. So it's part of this bigger meta population. The birds don't respect our fences at all. They trespass all the time. So the green dots are active clusters. Red means we've got greedy woodpeckers that weren't happy with just their clusters. So they have captured a nearby cluster and made that part of their territory. Yellow little triangles mean that it's currently an inactive cluster, but it's ready to go if somebody chooses to move in. And blue are recruitment clusters. That means they are man-made. We made them for the woodpeckers to expand if they so choose to take up our offer of free government housing. So, so what do we do? So one of the things we do is we map, tag, and paint all the cavity trees so we can protect them when there's fires and logging activities. You know, it can be hard to see those little cavity holes in the trees. So by putting these bright white bands on them, it tells us where we are. And then we, of course, map them so we can take care of them. Then we use these colored leg bands to track the population size and breeding dynamics. We put these on when they're really tiny, usually between 7 and 10 days of age is when we pull these chicks and put those on. And then we can identify them from afar using spotting scopes. And we don't have to necessarily have them in hand all the time. But when we do have them in hand, we do some population monitoring. We take some weights and some measurements and see. It's pretty neat. In Central Florida, we actually have the smallest red-cockaded woodpeckers within the whole range. And we know that because we do those measurements. And of course, we measure their reproductive success. We do this through a variety of means. And then something really neat is artificial cavities. So we mentioned they need these older trees. Well, sometimes we just don't have older trees. And they found out after a hurricane went through Francis Marion National Park and devastated that population. You know, they had lots of birds that survived these big storms, but they lost all the cavity trees. And someone said, well, will they use a bird box? Well, they won't, not if you just hang it on a tree. But if you do some fine carpentry with a chainsaw and actually insert that box into the tree, putty it up to look like bark and then paint it so it looks like a tree, they will indeed use them. So then we discovered that you could do that not just when there's a catastrophe, but to expand your population by giving them a place to go when they don't have anywhere else to go. So this is really neat, and we do this quite a lot. We also will go capture red-cockaded woodpeckers in large stable populations and then release them in smaller sites like Hal Scott, where they're more vulnerable. And this helps stabilize the populations by building up the population size and increasing or decreasing the inbreeding potential. And this is called translocation. And so these pictures are of us basically kidnapping them off of one site, and then we bring them to the new site. We screen them in overnight so they're not flying out loose, you know, being available for owls to eat. And then we pull those screens loose in the morning so they are free to go explore their new properties. Prescribed burning is probably the most important thing we can do for these birds. I mentioned fire is super, super important for them. And, you know, when you look at old photos of flatwoods, it was what you see in this top right corner where there's a car actually driving through the flatwoods because you didn't have all this palmetto and understory and oaks. It was just grasses. Grasses and tall stately trees is how all the descriptors from early on state. So by us doing this, we're trying to bring that back. And of course it benefits lots of other things like gopher tortoises and gopher frogs and all sorts of things. So that's what we're doing. Now prescribed burning, of course, takes lots of careful planning and preparation. You don't just go out there and light matches. So we have to write all these prescriptions and we have to map out our smoke plans and figure out where the houses are so we don't burn those down or smoke them out. Have to be careful with roads and airports and all that kind of stuff. So it's a tricky thing. So it's not quite the way Mother Nature did it, but it's a lot better than no fire. We just have to pick our conditions and do it carefully. I'm going to show you a quick video here of what it looks like from the air. We do a lot of burning from helicopters, so we can cover a lot of acreage in a fast-made time. So, but despite how much fire we have on the ground, you'll see that the flame length is really low compared to the trees. And the fire really is just down in the grasses and in the palmetto. It doesn't really get up in the trees. So fingers crossed that the video works. All right, so you got to see that from my vantage point a little bit. Oh, one again. Now, where we have cavity trees, we have to protect those extra well because they're super sappy from those trees, from those birds making all those resin wells. So we'll actually go into the burn zone ahead of time and mow out the area so the flame length is going to be a little lower. So that's why you see these crop circle looking things out here. You might see the white bands on some of the trees. And you might see that they look wet because we bring in our ATVs with spray rigs on them and we spray down the trees. And then we'll actually light around those trees so it burns out and away from them before the main fire comes through from the helicopter. So this is kind of what that looks like. No, I don't know why that goes twice. And so this is kind of what it looks like when it's all said and done and when the fire is coming through there. And you'll see even right after the fire, this is a baby pine tree on the top right here. You'll see the internal bud is actually still green even though the pine needles around it burn away, but they protect that internal core. So they're designed to survive this just fine. It looks really scary at first, but it greens up really fast, and these are the beautiful results from those fires. It's just it spurs life. Most of these pictures are taken very shortly after a fire. You can see there's still a lot of black on the ground, yet everything starts to bloom out and respond to that. So it really is the fertilizer that the property needs, so to speak. Another thing we do is plant trees. So a lot of these places were logged really heavily and the tree density is very low. So on House Scott alone, we have planted almost 1 million trees. We're over 750,000 trees. And I know we recently planted some more. So it's lots and lots of trees. And we've had really good survival on those. So this is some of the planting we have done at House Scott over the years. And, you know, it's paying off. This is how our breeding groups are. So PBG stands for potential breeding groups. That just means you have a male and a female, so you have the potential for breeding. So after the hurricanes in 2004, we were down to just 2 potential breeding groups on the site. So we did some translocations and brought it up. And then we've been pretty stable since. And we pretty much hit carrying capacity. We think 10 is about our capacity. So we're teetering right around that number. So we're really happy with that. The good news is we're not the only place doing this. It's the same thing as, you know, rinse and repeat across the Southeast. And so here's how the numbers have grown over the years, and this is why it is being reclassified. So really good work on teams, lots of coordination between these properties and all these land managers. They're doing a fantastic job. So I'm just going to leave you with a little ending video here that kind of takes you through a nesting season real quick here.
Ah, I hear the music.
All right, so I don't know if we have time for any questions, but if we do, happy to answer them. And if not, thank you guys for tuning in.
Oh, very nice. Thank you, Maria.
Good. We had one question from Laura, Maria.
Okay.
And she asked, will red-cockaded woodpeckers use telephone poles as a place to make a cavity, or do those have chemicals which would be harmful to the woodpeckers? And she had said she had heard a case of acorn woodpeckers using a telephone pole for a granary, but they were unsure how the chemicals would affect them when they ate those.
Okay, so with red-cockaded woodpeckers, they would never use telephone poles because they're only going to use live pine trees. So even if the live pine tree they're using gets hit by lightning, which happens quite regularly, they will abandon it because they need that sap to protect them from the snakes. So they will not use a telephone pole. As far as the harmful chemicals go, you know, we see a lot of woodpeckers that use telephone poles. And to my knowledge, I've never known any studies that have said that there's been harmful effects.
Good. And I think we had another question that said, can you talk about the donor sites and the process of deciding where they go?
Oh, well, that's quite a thing. So yeah, there's an annual meeting in Tallahassee. As a matter of fact, we just had it. Of course, this year it was virtual, but basically where the donors all stand up and say, this is how many birds we had this year. This is how many we have available to donate based on all sorts of preset criteria. And then recipient sites, they give presentations on what they've done for management to show why they are deserving of birds. And then they put in their request for how many they want. And then there's a matchmaker called the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service who decides who's worthy and who's not. And it's actually cooperative, so we actually get to decide to some degree amongst ourselves. But in the early days, we had very few birds being donated and lots of people want them. So it would be an all-out brawl for birds. But we have raised lots of funding to get more translocation biologists out there, making more birds available for it. And we've done a good job of growing woodpecker populations. So now there's more woodpeckers available for donation. So it's less of a fight now, but there is still a decision tree. We're actually really excited to be bringing on new properties that have had woodpeckers extirpated for a long time. If you know Jonathan Dickinson State Park, just this August, they were approved to start a new red-cockaded woodpecker population from zero there because we have some extra birds so we can donate them. When you start from zero, you need a lot of birds on the very first translocation. So they've been given that. So that'll be the fourth new population that we started. So it's pretty exciting. I'm hoping to get to help out with that one. So even though I work primarily at House Scout, we help with translocations all over. So
the donor site is the Apalachicola?
There are lots of different ones. Apalachicola is a big one because they have over 600 groups that are monitored. They're a huge population, and I credit a lot of that to their good burning practices. They're just fantastic with their burning up there. But yeah, we've gotten birds from Camp Landing, from Fort DeSoto, from Fort Benning, lots of military bases do an outstanding job growing woodpeckers. I mean, you give the military a mission, they're go, go, go. Especially when it means they get to open up more lands for training purposes if they grow these populations because of the Safe Harbor Act. So we've gotten a lot of military bases to get ones. Osceola National Forest is now doing really well. And so they've started donating birds. I think they've been donating birds for the last 8 years or so. So yeah, there's a number of good populations, and particularly Florida and Georgia are just busting out the birds. So.
And then Sam asked, what is the success rate of the translocation?
Oh, that varies greatly, but we consider anything above 50% to be a success. Because if you think about it, I mean, that's pretty good survival just for first-year birds, right? And that's all we move is first-year birds. So if we can match the survival rate that they would have on their natal territory, then we're pretty excited about that. First translocation we did after the hurricanes, we lost every single bird we brought in. The habitat just hadn't recovered enough. The next one we did, we retained 100% of the birds. So between the two, we were at 50%. And then ever since then at House Scout, we've been at about 65 to 70%. So we've been really fortunate to do well on that side. But it can vary from property to property, depending on management and lots of other things.
And then Terrence asked, is there still a population at Archibald Field Station? Because he remembers going back to
Archibald Field Station. Gosh, they're known for their scrub jays. I don't know if red-cockaded woodpecker. Oh, okay. There is actually at Avon. It's Avon, right? That's across from Archibald. Yes. Yeah. So Avon has red-cockaded woodpeckers, and there's Archibald biologists that work over there. So they're not actually on Archibald, but it's Archibald biologists that are helping take care of that population on Avon Park.
Very good. And then Deb asks, I'm sorry, Terrence also asks, are birds translocated between the states?
Yes. Yeah, lots of fun permitting to go along with that, but we do that. We have gotten birds from Georgia to Florida and vice versa. And the Carolinas, I don't think have any donor population, so they have to get them from out of state.
Very good. And I think Deborah mentioned that the Wekiva Springs State Park pines are about 80 years old. So.
Yeah, they're getting there. There has been talk about bringing woodpeckers back to Wekiva. Part of the criteria is how many acres you have of suitable habitat. So in Central Florida, each family needs about 350 acres of habitat. And they want to make sure that a property, if they're going to start one from scratch, can sustain at least 10 families. So do the math, you need at least 3,500 acres of contiguous, pristine, really good quality pine flatwoods. So they have to meet that to even be put on the list. And then they have to dedicate people for the management of them, because they're not a drop them out there and they'll take care of it from there. It's lots of annual management requirements. So they have to be on board with that. They have to have their higher up sign off on, yep, we're committed to doing this. So if they get there, then Wekiva will be there. Deborah, I think you were talking, but I didn't hear you. I don't know if you're on mute or.
Oh, I'm on mute.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, the Jonathan Dickinson, then it was just that the park really wanted them and had the commitment.
Yep. They had the commitment. They had the lands they've been prepping for years, actually. They've been working on this for over 10 years.
Very good. And we don't have any other questions. Anybody else? Questions?
Can I ask just a woodpecker question? Like the red-bellied, they only use their cavity 1 year or something? Is that true?
No. They'll use them over and over again. Okay. Yeah. And then they'll steal the red-cockaded woodpecker cavities and they crap them up, and I have to come along and clean them out. We just finished our annual cleanup. So once a year, we actually go visit all the inactive cavity trees, and we clean them out from bluebird nests and woodpeckers or flying squirrels who will crap them up, and red bellies and everything else, and make them usable for the young of the year that are now starting to search for cavities. So we get to climb a lot of trees. I get in good shape this time of year. And we get up there and we suck them out with vacuum cleaners, and we blow them out with air compressors, and we do all sorts of funky stuff. And you have to wear a whole face shield because it all comes out at you. It's a whole lot of fun. But yeah, it's the glorious part of the job, cleaning out crap out of holes in trees. Yeah.
All right, actually, we do have a few more questions.
Sure.
Terrence is asking, how successful is the resin in keeping away snakes?
It's very successful. Yeah, so it's funny, a lot of people said, well, you know, red-bellied woodpeckers that Deborah just mentioned can be so problematic. They take over red-cockaded woodpecker cavities. So one of the ways we can increase red-cockaded woodpeckers is to get rid of red-bellied woodpeckers. So they actually did an experiment on one of the properties where they did that. They removed the red bellies out of the equation, and what they found is they lost red-cockaded woodpeckers because now the snakes would predate. They would fight to get through that resin, even though it's really hard to do, because they didn't have the red bellies to feed on, and the red bellies are not good with the resin wells. So when you have both in the population, the snakes will eat the red bellies over the red-cockaded woodpeckers because they don't maintain resin wells. So they are effective at producing snakes, and but they will fight to get through it if they have to.
And then Kathy is asking, are all populations of the red-cockaded monitored in Florida?
Yep.
Ocala National Forest.
Yep, Ocala monitors theirs. So once they get to a certain population level, if they're not participating in translocation, either receiving or donating birds, they don't have to ban them anymore. But all state and federal lands, you do still have to monitor them. So they'll keep, you know, they'll count the trees and that sort of stuff. They may not count each individual bird the way we do, but they do still do that. Now, if it's private property, unless they are under a safe harbor agreement or something like that, they do not have to monitor them as extensively as government properties do.
And then Terrence also asked, you mentioned owls as predators. What are other predators?
Hawks. You know, your Cooper's hawks love themselves some red-cockaded woodpeckers. But all hawks can be predators for them. Swallow-tailed kites will go for them if they can get a hold of them. Yeah, owls at night. Those are the main ones, other than the snakes. Yeah.
And then besides the red-bellied, what other woodpeckers live in that same habitat?
Well, we'll see downies out there. Harries will live kind of on the outskirts of them, what we call the ecotones in the wetter areas of these areas. So they're primarily mesic flatwoods, meaning they're fairly wet, or at least they should be. The flatwoods where they live. So pileated woodpeckers will be out there. Red-headed woodpeckers, love those guys, so beautiful. So yeah, pretty much all of them. You'll get the sapsuckers. The sapsuckers like to fool us because they produce sap flowing on the trees. So sometimes I'll see a new sappy tree. I'm like, oh, we got another red-cockaded woodpecker tree, and then it's sapsuckers that have gotten in there. So yeah, so they're all there. They're all there. We get to see them all.
Okay, and Deb Devers is asking, how is the population at Dupuis? D-U-P-U-I-S.
Yep, no, Dupuis, you said it right. First place I ever burned. I got to be a burn boss down there a long time ago. They, I think they're just kind of staying stable. I know they're not doing wonderful. It's a really hard place to manage, super wet, super hard to get out there. But I mean, they're hanging in there, but I don't believe they're going gangbusters or anything like that.
And then Shauna asked, what are some of the largest populations and the most successful areas?
By far, Apalachicola National Park. They're just busting out in the woodpeckers. And you've got St. Mark's right adjacent to them that also do really well. So that whole panhandle area, and a lot of that is because it's just so many acres that are still intact, you know, and that's so rare. So they were never logged over quite as extensively as a lot of the other forests were. The fact that we protect as a national forest all intact really helped. And then that burning has just, the fire's key. And they really burn a lot. So.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
I noticed in some of your pictures, and obviously being at House Scott and some other places, the PVC entrance that you see, are those all boxes on the other side, or do you just try to make it more of a secure entryway on normal nests?
Yeah, so on the pictures you saw, those are all artificial cavities that had the PVC lining. We have about 50% natural cavities and 50% artificial at House Scott. So yeah, all the ones you saw there are that, but you can use PVC lining on natural cavities. So if we see that there's a pileated woodpecker red belly that's starting to bust out the natural cavity, we might go in and line that cavity with a PVC pipe to try to keep them from enlarging that cavity. Since there's so few trees that they can make those natural cavities, and we try to protect them as best we can.
Very cool.
So yeah, it does protect them, but the red-cockaded woodpeckers do get annoyed with them because sometimes it's not quite the shape they want, and they will just peck and peck and peck at that PVC trying to get the way they like, but you really can't peck away PVC pipes. It's a big waste of time.
Awesome.
And then Terrence also asked if they migrate.
They do not. Nope, they're here year-round.
Is there an active time for them more so than other, like seasonal?
No, pretty much sunrise, sunset, they're busybody birds. So yeah, but if you want to make sure you see one, you want to be in the cluster before the sun goes up. Because they're going to come out and they're going to work on their cavities first thing in the morning. Or you're there at sunset when they're coming back. Because otherwise they might be anywhere in their 350-acre territory, and that's, you know, needle in a haystack.
Right.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, thank you.
Yes.
Welcome.
Very good.
That's amazing. Very interesting. So we appreciate you taking your time. I know you're busy.
Yeah, I do see somebody asked how many clutches they have in breeding season and how long is the breeding season. So they only have one clutch per year unless they lose that clutch. If they lose it early on in nesting season, they might re-nest. Other than that, they will not. And they're pretty much summer nesters. So once July sets in, that's it. They're done. So April or July. You guys are very welcome. So glad everybody showed up and is interested in woodpeckers.
So cool.
Yeah, great presentation.
Are you going to come back and talk about scrub jays?
Oh gosh. I'll take that up with Deborah at another time.
Yeah, not to put you on the spot, I apologize.
Right before Jay Watch, maybe you can recruit some people if you need to.
We'll give that some thought.
Well, thank you. It was
You're
awesome.
welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. It's very good.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go back to this. Trying to figure out how to get back. Sorry. I'm already there. Sorry. Jack, I need help.
Okay.
Let's see.
Can you scroll down on the left side and
Thank you.
get towards the end?
There you go. There you're the host, Sam.
Ah, so
Sorry.
now I'm sharing. Let me see if I can get this. I don't think I can. And then,
You want to go to presenter mode, I believe?
yeah. I'm getting there.
Okay. I think we're good.
Maybe I am. I can't see it.
I see it.
I just can't see, like I can't get to the, I don't know. I can't get to the,
Well, all it is a question slide. Just and
yeah.
if anybody wants to share their birding story.
So obviously, if anybody's still here, you can share your birding stories and submit photos and questions to info@orangeaudubonflorida.org. Thanks for joining us. Does anybody have any questions on any of the other birds we talked about? And just a reminder too about the survey on Saturday at Wekiwa Springs State Park. So that's very important.
All right, well, we hope we see you next week for the program on purple martins. And then keep on, if you've already registered, we will be sending you the link to the upcoming ones. So no problem if you've already registered. We'll see you again.
Yeah, we're down to 10 now. Thanks everybody for being here. Have a good night.
I'm stopping my share there. Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Bye, Maria, thank you again.
Thank you, Maria.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Maria. It was awesome.
Okay, bye, Karen.
Bye.
So there we go. Yeah, I would.
I removed her.
Oh yeah, okay, there we go.
We're bound to have one napper per session. So
Yeah.
You turn off the recording, Sam?
What's that?
Turn off the recording.
How do I do that?
I guess I'll do it on my side.